From Perth, Australia, and broadcasting around the world, you're listening to The O Show with your host, Oren McCory. The O Show is a no-nonsense podcast bringing you the best advice on training, mindset, and nutrition to supercharge your efforts in the gym, the kitchen, and most importantly, in your head. Don't forget to share this episode on your social media. Now, let's get to it.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, guys, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to today's episode of The O Show with your host, Oren McCory. I'm here with my good friend, Daniel England from TeamEcto. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, good yourself, man?
I'm doing good. It's good to have you on, mate, because we've been connected probably since just after I moved over, because I was initially lining up a job at Surge before I worked at Doherty's, right?
Yeah, I remember that. Your name kind of popped up on that, the resume kind of list and stuff like that. And I was like looking through all your qualifications and your experiences, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna start following this guy. And next thing you know, we just hit it off on Instagram, just had massive conversations. And then you got a job at Doherty's, which is sick. So it's great.
Yeah. Nah, it's killer, man. And I think over the 2.5 years, you've really come into your own as a coach as well, which has been great to see, the growth of the brand and the whole TeamEcto and taking staff on board and everything else that's occurred since. So, mate, congratulations to you on the success over the 2 years that I have known you around Perth.
Yeah, thanks, brother. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely took some time, and glad that we've got a really solid team behind us, and just trying to provide the best quality content and results that we can get, same as yourself.
Yeah, massively, mate. And to be honest, I think I've interviewed most of the big hitters around Perth now in terms of the big teams that I see alongside Team OMC. And you're definitely up there with, in my opinion, the top trainers that if I was to refer out to somebody else, or somebody is inquiring with me and they say, oh no, I went with Dan instead, I'm like, fucking perfect. Guys are gone, just fucking listen to what he says.
And I think that's it, it's we're all in the industry to help people, and there's no kind of ego, especially with the like you say, the top guys, we all know each other, we're all best mates. And to have I've had in situations myself where someone's went, oh, I'm going with Warren, I'm like, yeah, sweet, awesome, you're gonna get exactly what you want. So very, very happy that you made that decision, not some kind of terrible coach who doesn't know anything and just happy to take your money, So
yeah, exactly, man. And that's why the podcast is so good, because I am bringing the information from all these different people over Perth, and everyone really just does support each other, even though, because it's a big city, mate. We're not competition. We're just colleagues, really, right?
That's it. It's half of us just catch up anyway at events and stuff like that. And it's just, just another day in the business, So I'm glad that we all get along and there's no itchiness or anything like that. So it's a really good kind of scene here in Perth for sure.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, man. It's awesome. Now, what I wanted to get you on, we were fireballing through some topics yesterday, and we thought we'll do some Q&A, but also I wanted to touch on human performance, because I feel like the little tweaks that you do to make that 1%, that's something that you're probably right up there with. I track a little bit of data with clients, but I don't track a whole lot, just because some of them it might not be suitable to. So if the clients listen to this, you will be getting an option to track more data over the next few weeks. But the core ones for me are going to be, sleep, digestion, recovery, steps, potentially blood pressure, if they're willing to go that far. But then outside of that, you're talking about obviously blood pressure, HRV, rest and heart rate, loads of different metrics. So I think if we give everyone a little bit of an insight as to the different stuff you do to get your athletes to that extra 1% and why they're important, then that would be a really good episode.
Yeah, definitely. It's I feel because everyone can kind of have different responses to similar training programs, stuff like that. It's when you apply these metrics and understand what's the concept behind them and how to alter them or how to improve it, that's when we start seeing body composition and also performance come into a lot of the bigger scale of things. So this is something that, even if it's just something as simple as wake and heart rate and sleep, those two alone will give you so much indication to how someone's going to handle the training volume, how they're going to handle the nutrition, and how they're just going to be all over. And you can start then kind of becoming like a fortune teller, so to speak, and go, okay, we're going to predict that we might need to deload at certain phases, we might need to alter the nutrition considerations, or anything that might be affecting how they're actually going to go in the gym, rather than just keep drilling someone into the ground all the time and go, oh, just keep doing more. It might be a time to go, okay, well, let's back it off a little bit and see how this goes. And next, they dropped 2 kilos, they're a lot leaner, and they're now added 10 kilos to the bar. And it's like, awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the art of coaching, in my opinion. Like, people don't pay me and you to get a training plan and like they're checking. They pay for the actual coaching. So it's like getting the data, getting what they present to us with a check-in, whether it's weekly, fortnightly, even monthly, if somebody like does FIFO and doesn't want to check in weekly. But it's how we interpret the data and the changes that we make along the way and how we coach that person. That's what they're paying for, rather than the bells and whistles and every extra little thing on top. Like, it's not the training plan, it's not the diet plan. It is the process of, this is where you're at now, this is what I think we need to change, and this is how it's going to impact you.
Yeah, it's more so, I feel with a lot of my guys, it's the education on why we're doing them. So it's the reason why. It's like, why would I want to track someone's sleep? Why do I want to track someone's blood pressure, their waking heart rate? Or do I want to track your digestion? These things will have such a massive impact than just me going, okay, here's a training program. Now just go kill yourself in the gym. Any person can make someone sore. Anyone can make someone puke during a session, but it takes a coach to go, okay, this is now how we get you to where you want to be. And also for you to make it sustainable as well, which I think is the most important part, that no one does really well. And if they do it really well, those are the top guys, the heavy hitters in the industry.
Yeah. That's killer. And like, it shows that we're on the same wavelength with a lot of our thoughts on things. So this should go down pretty well with people, I think. So let's get into an easy one that we can tackle before we get into the really nerdy stuff. So why would we look at digestion? Why would we ask a client to tell us about their poop, basically?
It's always a hard hitting question to go, okay, what's your poop looking like, and like bowel movements and stuff like that. But when you look at it, so this is a quote that I got from one of my mentors, which Luke Lehman, so Muscle Nerds, which very well as well, where he says, you are what you eat, but you also are what you digest, assimilate, and excrete. Right? So basically, if we're talking about the elementary digestive system, you have your esophagus, and it basically goes all the way down to your rectum. So within that part, we have what's known as the small intestine. And that's where we absorb a lot of the macronutrients. So obviously protein, carbs, and fats will go and absorb through there. So if someone's having an issue such as like irritable bowel syndrome or irritable bowel disorders, then that might cause an issue in regards to how they uptake these nutrients. So I could be slamming someone with, say, 5,000 calories a day. If their bowel movements are like they're pooping 3-4 times a day, that's not really a good indication that they're absorbing any of the food we're giving them. So that might mean that there's a food choice in there that might be affecting it. They might be having something like reflux. So obviously like GERD, which is gastroesophageal reflux disorder, which is like a heartburn. So that might mean that they're having a hard time absorbing protein. So understanding kind of these sorts of things will allow me to make nutrition considerations and maybe drop their protein down a little bit, tell them to chew their food a little bit more effectively, try and be in an environment where they're not stressed when they are eating a meal. And even then, if we're talking poop, which is always the fun one, it might be what's the type, normally we're looking for on a Bristol stool chart of a type of about 3 to 4, if it's anything like a 1 to 2, where it's kind of like really like diarrhea, very watery base, they might be having some sort of issues with that. Or if it's on the other end of the spectrum, which is like a 5-6, which is, constipation, then we might be looking at, okay, they might be having a bit too much fiber in their diet. They might not be drinking enough water. So there's a ton of considerations with that alone. And this is going to have a massive impact on how they absorb food and how we can then utilize it to improve performance, and also particularly in terms of body composition as well. Like if you're trying to get protein into the body, which is important for muscle protein synthesis, then you want to make sure that you're getting actually what you're ingesting.
And in terms of regularity with pooping, like what is ideal? Because I think people will be all over the place. What's normal for one person will be different to somebody else, but some people, like you say, might poop 3 times a day versus some people might poop once every 3 or 4 days, right? So what's considered regular in our world?
Normally regular would be around 16 hours. So that's kind of the thing is, so normally most people kind of poop in the morning and they might poop maybe once more throughout the day. And when you're doing it is you want to make sure, like, you ask questions, go like, what's the consistency of it? It should kind of, sounds really bad, but it should be like a thick brown kind of snake looking situation, it's like snakes on the plane, it's just coming out the toilet. But in that situation, that's something that might be, there, and then you go, okay, well, does it feel like, you've kind of emptied it out? Have you emptied the tank, or do you feel like you still have some going on in there? Because that might have another issue going down the track, okay, why are we not kind of having a full excrement? Why is it taking a little bit more or more frequent? And that might be an issue with transit time. So that's when we go, okay, if your transit time's a little bit too fast, we might need to look at your diet and go, okay, are you having enough fiber intake? Are you, what's the volume of your food? Stuff like that may have a massive consideration in terms of the hours and transit time and also frequency, of course.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say at this stage that we're not saying the clients take pictures of their poop and send it to us.
I don't want to see that. I don't know. Like, I have a bad enough time looking at my own. I don't want to see you'll know when it's different. Like, it will feel different. You're like, okay, that wasn't too right. Maybe have a quick look in the toilet. Okay, it was a type 1. Okay, well, that might be an issue. Then you just basically, in a check-in form, I get my clients to go, okay, what type was it and what was the frequency? That was it. That's all I need to know. I'll ask more questions if I need to. I'm like, okay, well, what about this? What about this? So something as simple as, okay, well, when you did it, what was the foods that you consumed around the last 24 hours? Something like that might give you an indication to a meal that they might be having that might be triggering them, or something along those lines.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, it's something you probably only need to do if you're quite unsure about what scale you're on. Just do it for a couple of days, because like you say, you will know the difference. And if you normally have a really runny one and you suddenly have one that feels more like a solid snake, like we're talking about now, then it's you're gonna know the difference. And then you're looking like, all right, okay, that's maybe a 3, so I know what that feels like. So what did I do differently? Like you said, like fiber intake, water intake, what's been good that's allowed me to have what's considered a normal poo today.
And that's it. Once you kind of have normal, then I say just continue to chase that feeling. Whatever you're doing is working, don't rock the boat. If what you're doing is working, don't try and change it. Don't try and add any crazy supplements or any crazy routines. It's working. Most of the times, it's just through simple lifestyle strategies. Yeah.
And I think as well, like there's a lot of things that can affect it too, like the inability to process your fats correctly. Caffeine is a big one as well. But that's all like specialist stuff for when you've actually started to track it, and then you can refer to a coach, and then the coach can sort of look at, right, what's your fiber intake, what's your water intake, are you like, depending on the consistency, it might indicate to you that they're not processing their fats correctly, or it might be that their coffee is hitting them really, really fast and it's causing that reaction. Maybe they just need to put a little bit of fat into their coffee with some full cream milk to slow it down a little bit.
Yeah, well, caffeine does help activate an enzyme which is known as gastrin, which does increase peristalsis of the intestines. So that's why when most people consume coffee in the morning, they have what's known as the caffeine poop. So that's kind of, that's why a lot of people will have it and they go, okay, I've got to do my morning coffee poop in that situation. But in terms of like the fact that they're having a malabsorption of fat, that will actually show in their bowels anyway. So that's the condition known as diarrhea, which is where the gallbladder is not producing enough bile to help kind of emulsify the fat within itself. So taking something like taurine, TUDCA, oxbile salts, or porcine bile salts will help with that emulsification. But then that should come along in the questionnaires as well. So you should be asking, do you have a gallbladder? Stuff like that. Because if you don't, then hey, I'm not going to put you on something like a ketogenic diet, because what's the point? You can't emulsify it in the first place. We're just going to create more problems and more difficulties down the track.
Yeah, that's killer, man. And there's good information here, but the thing is as well that I want people to realize that this is stuff that you've learned a lot on. You know a little bit more
Yeah.
about me than it, but it's stuff that we actually study. So don't go and try to work this shit out yourself and just fire some Tudka in for the sake of it because you heard Dan just mention it. It's work with a coach or work with a doctor to like learn this stuff and work out what's best for you if you feel that you're malabsorbing something like fat or you're getting mega caffeine poops all the time, then you just need to limit your caffeine in the morning maybe, you know?
Yeah, that's it. You know, like I spent 8 years at university studying nutrition and exercise physiology. So for me, it sounds really easy. You just go, I take this, but it's the doses, it's when, it's how, you know, you don't like, obviously that's when referring to someone who knows how to do it and how to implement it correctly would be such a great idea, alongside obviously medical professionals such as a doctor or a dietitian or an EP, or even just a coach who's really, really educated and well versed in how to do this correctly. You know, like I don't want people taking like excessive doses and going, I can't poop anymore, and now it's like a type 5, 6, and you can't go anymore. And I'm like, well, sorry, please take consideration of that.
Yeah, that's fair, man. That's fair. So I think that covers like digestion pretty well. I don't want to overwhelm people with the first 20 minutes being all about poop, but it's an important one because then that feeds into like performance, how you feel, how you're utilizing your food. So that's probably one of the biggest ones that we do need to look at. But what about sleep? Because sleep is also like, it's the key, right? In terms of how you feel when you wake up, your performance, your mood, your recovery, everything comes back to sleep. So why do we track sleep and how do we do that?
So they did a study ages ago where they compared 2 groups of people who were in a dieting process. So I love this study. I don't know who actually authored it, so I can find that out for you and notify you. But it's like one of the most well-common ones that you see a lot of people on kind of like the coaches in Instagram going like, this is why you need to sleep a lot. So one group slept 5.5 hours and another group slept 8.5 hours. You might know the study I'm talking about. And the 5.5 hour group lost some fat mass, but they lost a lot more considerable lean mass in the process in comparison to the 8.5 hour group where they lost a lot more fat mass, but a small amount of lean mass, which is obviously evident when you are dieting, you will lose some lean tissue in the process, but it wasn't as much as the 5.5, which is really, really good because when we look at that, it allows us to recover a lot more better. It helps us obviously with our mood. It also will help with regulation of cortisol, and also kind of going into the next day. So if you have a poor night's sleep, it actually increases the half-life of cortisol into the next night, which can be detrimental to obviously recovery, which is, especially when the dieting periods, you want recovery to be the absolute key point to this. You don't want to keep burning the candle at both ends and going, it's okay, I'll keep grinding because that's what I've got to do. And it's like, no, you should, adaptation is what you can recover from. So if your sleep is not going well, then we're going to have a really bad time with that. So with sleep in itself, we need to look at it from 2 ends. So we need to look at sleep quality and sleep quantity. Ideally, I prefer sleep quality over quantity to start off with, because the last thing we want to see is when someone goes like, and you probably say this to your clients yourself, you go, how many hours do you sleep? You know, it's like, oh, I sleep 8 hours. And you're like, okay, cool. When you wake up in the morning, how many times do you have to hit snooze on the alarm clock? Or about 4 or 5 times? Okay, so that's not really good quality sleep then. If you need like that snooze, because let's face it, like a snooze button is like 8 minutes, right? Between kind of setting off the next alarm. It takes about 7 to 10 minutes to fall back to sleep. So you're only getting really probably 1 minute of decent sleep going into a sleep cycle. So I would rather have someone who's sleeping 7 hours, but they're getting really good quality sleep and they can wake up pretty much at the drop of a hat. That to me means that we're in a really, really good situation, because that's what matters more is the quality. Because obviously when we talk about a sleep cycle, so sleep cycle is basically a phase of the sleep. So how we go from basically, so there's 4 stages of sleep. So we have stage 1, stage 2, and then we have like stage 3 and 4, which is kind of together. And then we have REM sleep. So when we look at that, REM sleep is where we get a lot of kind of the mental processing and stuff like that. So that's where we tend to dream a little bit more. And then stages 3 and 4 is when we're a lot more kind of restorative in that sense. That happens in the first kind of 40 minutes of sleep within itself. So if we look at that and we say a sleep cycle lasts anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes, 6 hours of sleep, if we have good quality sleep, that's 4 sleep cycles, which is on average, we want around 4 to 5 sleep cycles a night. So if we say anywhere from 6 to 7.5 hours of actual decent sleep, that's a really, really good indication. So that's where the kind of 8 hours of sleep will be, is kind of the standard for quantity of sleep.
Yep.
So when we kind of look at that with people, is one thing that we can control and we can actually help improve our results and obviously training is making sure we're getting a good kind of sleep routine happening, getting good quality sleep, because this is then going to help move on into the next day. And obviously if I'm about to do, say, I'm about to do a heavy leg session, I want to make sure that I'm pretty much as restored and as ready to go as I can, so I can hit that with a high degree of intensity to help progress my goals a lot faster.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And I think with that whole alarm clock thing, one of the previous guests I had on, Matt Peacock, his thing is about winning the first battle. And it's about your first battle of your day is whenever that alarm goes off, what do? Do you hit snooze or do you just fucking get up? And if you can, that's something you can train yourself to do. Like you said, by hitting snooze, you're not really getting that much extra sleep. And you're probably just putting yourself into a bigger hole, because you're going to have a minute of sleep and then you're going to have to wake up again. And then it's like, you're just, in my opinion, you're just fucking yourself even more with it.
Oh God, yeah. For me personally, I'm very, very big on routine. I don't know whether that's the obsessive compulsive in me or the type A personality, but I always say to people, it's like, you want to go to bed pretty much at the same time with about a 30-minute window either side. So for me, I'm a bit of a nana these days. Like my partner will give me shit for this. I'm pretty much asleep on the couch, normally by about 8:30. Right?
Yes.
I'm like a nana now. So by about 8 o'clock, my eyes start to get a little bit heavy and I start kind of dozing off. And then by about 8:30, I get myself up and I put myself to bed, and she's still watching TV or reading a book or whatever she's doing. And I'm like, So, but I'll be up in the next morning by about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, because that's when obviously I have to start getting ready to do work, do my check-ins, my consultations, all that stuff. So I'm still getting about 8 hours or 7.5 hours of sleep. And I do this pretty much every day. That is my routine day in, day out, because the body craves that circadian rhythm. And that's kind of the thing, is when we look at that circadian rhythm, our bodies are biologically have their own clocks, and you probably notice this, you get hungry at certain times of day. You feel most energetic at a certain time of day. And that's obviously whether it's in the morning or in the afternoon. So it makes sense then that we should want to go to sleep and wake up around the same time every day. That's innately what we do as a species, So I don't get it when people are like, oh yeah, I go to bed at this time one day and then I wake up at this time. I'm like, okay, weekends, I can understand that a little bit more, because obviously if, you're working, doing nights or something like that, or a little bit smaller of a sleep cycle, so to speak, we can kind of play a little bit of catch up on weekends, but we should try and get that routine happening. It's the first thing you do to improve sleep quality,
Yeah. And what's your opinion on, like you say, you nap on the sofa for a little bit before you then go up, brush your teeth and get into bed properly? What about naps during the day and falling asleep like that? Beneficial, or should you just, when you feel yourself getting tired, go straight up to bed? So
if it's napping during the day, it's not actually a bad thing to do. Ideally, how I would do that then is, say 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. So in between that kind of halfway point of sleep, 12 hours from there, that's when I would try and have a nap, if I was to have a nap. Anything more than that might throw off my kind of circadian clock a little bit, which may affect my sleep going into the actual nap itself. Now, with the nap itself, you want it to be kind of around 30 to 60 minutes. You don't want anything too crazier than that, because then it's going to start affecting you, kind of make you a little bit groggy. And then obviously that will then impair your sleep into the next night. So I think naps are a great thing to do if a person can't do a full kind of sleep routine, and I know some clients who do that, and I think it's a great thing, and it does help their performance and body composition. again, they do have the option to do that. You know, that's their jobs and they're allowed to do that. Whereas someone, if, you know, you're working a 9 to 5, napping on the job is probably not going to be the best thing for you.
Yeah.
So then we need to nail that kind of nighttime sleep routine.
Yeah. And then what about with times for bed? Like the old saying, which I don't know whether you agree, is that 1 hour sleep before midnight is as good as 2 after. Do you agree with that, or is it just a case of the 8 hours and that time, that restorative sleep matters?
Yeah, I'd probably say I don't know too much about that to actually state something about that right now. But I'd probably say, like, look, the main thing is making sure we get 4 to 5 sleep cycles every night. That's what's going to be ideal. Now, whether, you know, you sleep 3 sleep cycles and then you do 1 during the day, that's still 4 sleep cycles in, you know, that time period, you know, in a 24-hour time period, which is then going to still have its benefits in that. I mostly say to people, like, I just want that routine, you know, going to bed at a normal time, you know, like, and kind of the routine before bed should be pretty good as well. So, you know, like, before bed, you know, electronics, or use blue blockers or anything like that to kind of reduce kind of that interaction with the retinal ganglion cells, which obviously tell your brain that, hey, you know, the sun's up. And then kind of around that point, then, you know, waking up at the same time. So then what's your routine upon waking up? You know, like you said with the guest you had before, you know, like smashing the first goal of the day, you know, wake up when the alarm comes on, you know, and then eventually you should be able to wake up before the alarm a little bit, not like an hour or so before, but kind of like wake up like a few minutes beforehand and kind of beat the alarm. That would be when, okay, now your circadian rhythm is in check. Probably don't need your alarm clock anymore.
Yeah. And that sometimes baffles people. And to me, to an extent, because I still use my alarm clock, a lot of the times I'm up in that sort of 5 to 30 minutes beforehand. And for me, there's no point going to sleep. Once I need to pee and check my phone, it's like, okay, I've only got half an hour. I may as well just get up. But like the fact that some people are able to just wake at the same time every day, whether it's 5 or 6, and they're fully refreshed, might seem strange to people. But like, how do people get up without an alarm clock? But that's just a case of where they've had such a killer night's sleep, and their rhythm and everything else in terms of time to bed, time to wake is just so set that then they don't need the alarm clock. They don't need that to wake them and get them into that rhythm.
Yeah, exactly. That's when you kind of look at it, like, and this is kind of going like, you know, Paleolithic, kind of like ancestral times. We would wake up when the sun was coming up. We would go to sleep when the sun was coming down. If we're doing the exact same now, we're just kind of not doing it with alarm clocks. You know, we didn't have alarm clocks back then, but we were able to have a really good kind of sleep routine. So why not be able to replicate that now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's just because of today's society, like, you know, staying late, watching movies, you know, like being on laptops, working overtime, you know, or like night shifts and stuff like that, and then potentially throw out this rhythm, so to speak. So it's important to then have the routines nailed, so then we don't have to rely on it as much.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think we'll not get into it now, but like night shifts and stuff like that is a massive topic of how you kind of need to optimize your environment. And like, it's listed as a carcinogen now, like night shifts. That's how bad it is. So like we could literally deep dive on that, but I think it would take too long. So I might need to get you back for one on that.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to come back on for that one for sure. That would be a real crazy one. Get a few of us together, and we can do like a sleep round table, you know, or something like that.
yeah, 100%. Why not, mate? Yeah, that'd be killer. So I think that covers sleep pretty well. There is books that I'll maybe put in the show bio of like different things on sleep if people want to dive into more detail. But one other thing that nearly every coach in the world should be tracking, if they don't, it's steps, right? Why do we track steps, and what's the purpose of this?
So steps was kind of like coined ages ago as basically a way to determine NEAT. So NEAT obviously stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So which is what would be classified as unstructured exercise or structured routine. So NEAT is also classified as fidgeting. So, you know, if I'm moving my arms, I'm swinging in my chair, that is NEAT. So that is expended energy. Now, what happens is, in particular, if someone is dieting, we do get a suppression of NEAT. So obviously we're trying to kind of sort of like reduce our output a little bit to help with the body being able to handle the deficit, whether it's being aggressive or anything like that. So a long time ago, steps was actually used as a way to make sure that we get that NEAT going on. Now, there is some benefits in that when we look at it. So obviously low levels of activity does have effects on something which is known as brain-derived nootropic factors. So obviously BDNF, which is important for brain health and cognition. And so when we look at that, it's important to make sure we have some degree of activity. And, you know, especially yourself right now, you know, you're in a deficit, you're looking really lean right now, which is, you know, like fangirling right now on that, which is really good. So you might notice some days you just don't want to move as much. You're like, you're kind of like, it's instead of you being in like second and third gear of your car and kind of accelerating, just moving as much as you can, you might be kind of cruising in fourth or fifth and just kind of like just coasting. So having something as steps might be beneficial to kind of make sure you're still hitting kind of activity levels and making sure that your output is still being matched all the time, which is a good consistency for it. The other downside to that is we see a lot of people these days programming like an astronomical amount of steps. Like, you know, I say to most people around 10, 12,000 is pretty easy to do. If you're having to do something like 18, 20,000 steps and that's getting programmed to me, and you have to go on a treadmill to hit those numbers, I would just rather you do cardiovascular training. You know, I don't feel like, you know, if you have to drive your car to go to the gym, to walk on a stationary platform to get your steps up, you're probably not, it's probably a bit too high of a number, you know? So what I normally say to a lot of my clients when, you know, we're trying to do body composition work or anything like that, is I'll get them to record like a weekly average. So I'll get them to just move like they would normally. And then I'll go, okay, what's your average over that week? Might be 8,000, might be 9,000. And I go, cool. Your goal is to just hit that. Do not, if you exceed it, great, but you can't go below that number. And then from there, what we can do is we can then, once we kind of create a deficit, we can go, okay, like say we built their calories up to a really good point, everything's moving great. And then we go, okay, we're about to commence the deficit now, so we're going to bring calories down. Before we do that though, let's do another week, just seeing what your step count is like, because it might be a little bit higher now because obviously we've increased food intake. So they're going to have more energy to do things and they're going to start kind of doing some unstructured movements, some steps and stuff like that. And then we go, okay, this is the new number. Now we've got to that number, let's not go below that.
Yeah, killer. And in terms of like a minimum, because I'm pretty sure it was you who first coined a number that I seen on Instagram, and I was like, oh, I've never actually heard someone say a minimum number.
So I actually, again, I will give credit where credit's due. It was actually Luke again. You actually coined the number. It was like, I think he said it was like 7,116 or something like that. It was something really like something like that. And he might be able to message me and correct me on this, and I'll happily say, no, it's a different number. But he said that was the number that was kind of needed for hypothalamic regulation, which obviously the hypothalamus is the kind of main governing organ for pretty much everything. So he said about 7,200 as kind of a roundup number would be a good number to kind of hit every day. Obviously, then most people can hit 8,000 pretty comfortably. You know, like I have a pretty cruisy job. I just walk around the gym occasionally and train people. Most of the time I'm sitting on a laptop. So for me, I kind of say 8,000 my minimum. I don't like it when it goes below that. You know, in some cases I've been pretty lazy. You know, I'll happily admit I'll get like 4,000 or 5,000 in on some days. So then I might go outside and go for kind of like a walk on the night time, which is kind of a good routine as a wind down, which will help again with my sleep. So that's a kind of 2-for-1 right there.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, like there's a lot of people pumping out big steps, and their whole reason for it is they say, oh, I don't give my clients cardio. But in reality, if they're giving them 15, 20,000 steps to do, it's making them do cardio, whether it is outside or whether it is on a treadmill. If you actually have to think, oh, fuck, I've got 8,000 steps still to do, or my coach is going to be pissed off, then they've got to actually go out and like do cardio to think about it. So it's not really, like you said, it's probably too high. And if you hear these gurus talking about how I don't give my clients cardio, just steps, it's probably still going to be where you're fucking doing cardio, or you might feel so guilty that you'll, you know, buy a treadmill or drive to the gym just to get your steps in.
Yeah, which kind of sounds, oxymoronic when you think about it. I'd rather just program cardio in for a client because we're going to get a lot more benefits in doing so as well. You're going to get, depending on the heart rate and the intensity that you use, you either might get some fat oxidation, you might get some glucose oxidation as well. It's going to improve your heart health. It's got a ton of other benefits than just fat loss. So why not just make someone do that then? If you're going, okay, say the client's on 9,000-10,000 steps a day, and you go, okay, now instead of increasing your steps, let's just add like 20 minutes of cardio. Something as small as that might be what they needed to kind of kick it off a little bit, rather than going, okay, now your step count's going to be 15,000. And they're like, okay, well, I have to walk on a treadmill now. It's like, why don't you just crank up the intensity a little bit and go for a run or go on a spin bike, something like that, where you can now get some actual benefits from it rather than just increasing it.
Yeah, that's fair, man. That's fair. And I think that gives us a pretty good look into NEAT. So let's talk into something else which links in nicely, because when you're looking at blood pressure, a lot of the times ways to bring it down, like cardio will be implemented to improve cardiovascular function. So let's talk about why we track blood pressure and why it's so important, because it really is, it's a silent killer, right?
Oh, well, when you think about it, like, heart disease in some shape or form, whether it's a heart attack, a stroke, or just some sort of chronic disease from, your heart, is probably one of the biggest killers we have today, like up there with obviously like cancer and stuff like that. And then I think diabetes is on the rise as well as like a chronic health condition. But it's so important, man, like blood pressure. Like I say to most people, if you're not taking your blood pressure as a coach, you're not doing your job properly. It's super easy to do. You don't have to be a genius. Most of them are electronic now. Like when I started in the industry, it was like old school, like a stethoscope and like,
really?
like the proper one. I still got it. Like I still have mine at home. I still use the electric ones and stuff like that. But if you've got someone who's got, say, and now most people will have high blood pressure. So if it's, a high systolic or a high diastolic, then that might be an issue. And then that will also help you with your exercise selection. If I've got someone who's got really high blood pressure, I'm probably not going to load them up on a leg press where they're now going to be in a position that's going to elevate their blood pressure even more, because the last thing I want is my client to have a stroke on the leg press. Yeah. So just something as simple as that will help govern what exercises we do, whether we do cardio at the start to improve that. So then when we do go into training, not only are they going to get improved recovery, but now we can start loading up exercises that increase intra-abdominal pressure, and then therefore we're going to still make better progress.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And in terms of if their blood pressure is high coming in, like what's the strategies you would implement? Like you said, you don't want to load them on a leg press, but what would their first 4 weeks look like versus somebody who has a normal blood pressure?
So I would prioritize or front load a lot of cardio. And I know it's kind of like bad. It's like, oh, cardio is the demon these days. It makes you skinny and it makes you fat. I'm like, well, okay, but last time I checked, a client never came to me and go, what's your goals? Like, you know what? I'd really like to have a heart attack. That's exactly what I want, So when you look at that, I'll put a lot of cardio in because we're going to get some conditioning effects. Again, we might get some reduced fat loss. We can help with obviously blood sugar control, everything like that. So I will probably prescribe anywhere from like 30 to 40 minutes of cardio for the first kind of like on a daily routine. And then we might do some resistance training in the background. And then obviously once their blood pressure is normalized, they're going to have a better heart rate, better sugar control, might even get some better sleep quality as well. Then we can go, okay, let's reduce the cardio intensity or duration, pull it down a little bit. Now we can start increasing resistance training. And that's when we're going to start seeing kind of, better muscle tone, more improvements in strength. And I know that they're not going to have an issue to the track, but it's something that we still need to kind of monitor and regulate, because if it starts seeing that starting to creep up a little bit, then we might put in a few days a week of just some global conditioning. So it's just nice and easy, like 20 minutes after training, just kind of like cruising, whether it's on a spin bike or a treadmill or something like that, or a cross trainer, and just allowing them to kind of get that back down into a good health position.
Yeah. And in terms of, it's quite inexpensive now to buy a blood pressure monitor, but what's your recommendations with clients whenever you ask them to track blood pressure?
So normally I say if they have a blood pressure at home, you know, a few times a week, so maybe twice a week would be a good kind of start point. If they don't have one, then I go, look, the gym should have one that they train at. Gyms should have it as part of their kind of health questionnaires when the person signs up. If they don't, which I've seen a few gyms don't have it, so I was a little bit like, okay, just go to a chemist or a pharmacy. They do it for free. You know, you might be that weirdo who goes in once a week to go get your blood pressure done, but it will pay dividends in the long run. You know, you want it to be in a good kind of range because it will have implications down the track.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is that whenever you go for your groceries, no matter where it is, there's a pharmacy that's going to be pretty much attached to it, right? And if you just stack on that habit where every time you go for your food shop, you're going to call into that because you don't want to spend $100 or whatever it is on a blood pressure monitor, then just call into the pharmacy and get it done. It'll take 5 minutes, and at least then you know that you're in a good range and you can give your coach that feedback then.
Yeah. Some considerations to obviously be wary of with that is obviously just making sure that the person is a little bit rested beforehand. So obviously don't like run to the pharmacy and then get it done because it is going to increase. And there's also is a consideration which is known as white coat fever, which is where people kind of have a little bit of anxiety when they are getting it done. So even what you can do is just have the cuff on and just wait like a minute or two, just kind of like relax, deep breathes and stuff like that, then get the test done. And that's going to help a lot more when kind of getting really a lot more accurate kind of reading of that blood pressure.
Yeah, and I always said take the average of the three readings, and it might not change that much, but normally if you do have that like white coat fever, or it's just because the cuff tightens up, right, and you're like, oh shit, I forgot what this feels like. I think it takes 3 and then just average it.
Yeah, you just got to make sure if you are doing more than once, just that kind of a little bit of rest, because there is obviously when you are getting the pressure around that arm, it will have some constriction of blood vessels, which is obviously what you're measuring. So maybe having like a little bit of rest, like 2 to 3 minutes rest between each one, will give you kind of a better indication for that. But most of the time, if the person is a little bit relaxed, like white coat fever or kind of like that, oh wow, like shit, that's compressing me now, it will be a little bit higher. We're not going to see astronomical pump up. So if someone's sitting at like, I don't know, 150 over 90, then we might go, okay, hey, that's not white coat fever. You know, like if we got 10 points off that, you're still like 140 over 85. That's not ideal.
Yeah. And that's something that I never thought about, is actually giving that time for the blood vessels to relax after. So there we go. We learn something new every day. Killer. So that covers blood pressure, mate. Now let's get into the really geeky stuff. So let's talk heart rate variability. Like, what is it and why would we track it, and sort of who is it applicable to? Like, is it something you would have all clients do, or do you give your clients the option of tracking this stuff as well? Now, because this is the geekier stuff that isn't really, it's going to impact health, but it's not really necessary to make sure somebody's healthy, right?
Yeah, it does have some implications. So heart rate variability, or when we do it, which would be known as heartbeat variability. So there's a difference between the two. So the only time you can actually get an HRV is if you go to an actual kind of like a hospital and they put like the EKG on you. So what that indicates is it's the gap between the R intervals. Sorry. So what happens is if you look at kind of like the monitors and it kind of has a pump up, it's like beep, like that. It's the spike. So what you're measuring is the milliseconds between heartbeats. So what a lot of people think is they think that your heartbeat kind of like on rhythm, where it doesn't. Sometimes it'll beat and then it'll kind of go a little bit quicker. And that's the variability between heartbeats. Now, this has a really good implication for your autonomic nervous system. So in terms of whether you're in a fight or flight situation or a rest and digest. Now, a lot of people go, your fight or flight's good, and it's only good in certain situations, such as training. But I don't want to be chronically stressed all the time when I'm not training, you know? So that's going to have massive health implications, you know, digestion, sleep, even things such as sex drive, which is quite common. So when we look at that, we want to be in a lot more kind of relaxed situation, about 96% of your day, you know? And then when you are training, which is like 4%, which is an hour, then you want to be in that fight or flight and ready to kind of like just smash whatever's in front of you, you know? So heartbeat variability will measure the RR interval. Now, for most clients, I give them the option. So whether they use like Aura, Whoop, or like Elite HRV. So they have the polar chest straps and they can do that. Or there's a really, really great app, which is HRV for training, which just uses your camera lens and it's actually really accurate. And it gives you kind of like a readiness. Now, I give the option to everyone. I say it's really, really good to do. And I recommend a lot of people do it because it gives you an idea of recovery and stuff like that. So when we look at recovery, we need to go, what is, are you able to handle your training, or are we going to be having, not recovering that well? And if so, do we need to deload you? Do we need to change your training stimulus? Do we need to increase food intake? Is there something going on that we don't know about? So that's where I say, it's important to have that, but it's not, if someone's not going to opt into it, I'm not overly kind of stressed on it, but I do expect some of my athletes and people that I am doing, say, a competition prep with to be monitoring that because it will have a massive effect on how they look at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as well, though, like we need to take these measurements with a pinch of salt, especially when you are going for something extreme. Like right now, mate, like my sleep's not the best. I got the Oura Ring last week or the week before, and like since then my Fitbit made me think I slept well, but now this is telling me my sleep shit pretty much. My readiness score is just in the toilet, but the thing is I've got 5 weeks to push on this, and we're pushing the body to get really, really fucking lean. So while I'll look at it, like normally I'll train in the morning, so I'll not look at my readiness until the lunchtime. So after I've trained, so I'm like, oh, so how ready was I to train today? After I've trained, because I know that, if I wake up feeling good, I'm not going to look at that score and be like, oh, actually it's suggesting I maybe slow down a little bit because I'm feeling good before it, right? But maybe if I feel my energy's in the toilet, I'll be like, fuck, I wonder what this score's saying, and then I can look into that a little bit.
And then the other thing as well to be really, really considerate with this as well is we're looking at trends at the end of the day. It's not a single spike. If someone has a single spike, I'll still allow them to train like normal, because it might have just been something that might have affected it slightly. So a real funny example for me is alcohol does that to me. Right. So if I have like a glass of wine, it does affect my recovery into the next day. I'm not going to go, oh, damn, I can't deadlift today because I had a glass of wine with dinner last night, So when you kind of look at that, it's just one spike anomaly. But if it's consistent trend going down, then we might go, okay, this is something that we need to be kind of considerate about. Maybe we just back it off a little bit in terms of your training. So instead of kind of like, pushing to an RR 0, we might go to an RR 2, for example, or maybe just do a little bit of a less set, or maybe decrease the weight that you're using and go for more repetitions to kind of work more on the lactate accumulation side of things to improve your recovery capacity rather than pushing heavy all the time.
Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, you can see why tracking something like this is going to be beneficial, especially if you're looking at extra 1%, right? It's not for everyone, just somebody who wants to lose a little bit of weight, but if you're trying to get the maximum out of your performance, like a lot of athletes, whether it's physique, strength-based, sports-based, like this sort of stuff is huge.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so really, really good example of this would actually be someone who was on your podcast, Brendo. So Brendo's just got a Whoop. And it actually showed that his strain was a little bit lower. So it means that he wasn't going to be able to train as well as what he would be normally. So he made a kind of a little active recovery day. He went to got a massage, had a nap, and the next day it was like up dramatically. So his ability to train was so much more better. If he didn't listen to it, he might have kind of put it down a little bit more, and then you would start noticing like performance decrements, which is not ideal based on what his goals would be. So when looking at that, it just allows you to kind of go, okay, this is something to be wary of, something to take into consideration. Is it for everyone? No. Some people just don't want to do that, and that's okay. I would then use something as like working heart rate, which would be a really, really good, easy and kind of non-invasive indication. And it takes like 15 to 30 seconds to assess that in the morning, So something like that might be a lot more beneficial to pretty much everyone rather than going, okay, what's my heartbeat variability doing? And again, the range should be like 70 to 80 milliseconds between. And then if it's higher than that, great, awesome. I know some people, it's like they get like 130 on the Oura, and I'm like, I hate you guys so much. You're just amazing. But if you're in, say, such as yourself, you've got 5 weeks to push it, you might see that starting to come down a little bit. Again, that might be as an indication, obviously sleep might be a little bit more affected than what you might be, being in a calorie deficit might also affect that, because we know that is a stress on the body. Eating less is stressful. So all these things might have an implication, but understanding where it is right now and what we're trying to do will give you a better kind of indication, or just information more than anything of, okay, normally it's sitting around 50. It's not there right now. It's like 25. Okay. Do I think I can push myself that hard today? Probably not. It's just a slight drop. Okay, let's train like I would, and then assess it tomorrow. Okay, it's still down low. Okay, I might go a little bit lighter today, but I'm still going to go train.
Yeah, 100%, mate, 100%. One thing you mentioned there, which leads in nicely to the next one, is rest and heart rate, or waking heart rate, as you said.
Yeah.
So why is that important, and why is it easier to track, and why should it be something that we potentially look at with clients?
So I always do waking heart rate. I prefer waking upon resting, just because it minimizes kind of what we've done throughout the day. So if someone pretty much first thing in the morning, we don't have a lot of stress going on. If we've nailed our sleep, we're not rushing to get to work because we missed 5 alarms and we're going like, shit. We can then go, all right, we should have a pretty decent heart rate, especially if we are training and we are looking after ourselves. So a lot of clients, I kind of say the heart rate should be around 45 to 55 beats per minute. So that's kind of my range. If you're, training more cardiovascular, so, you're an endurance athlete, then it might be a lot lower, because obviously, you're going to get those cardiovascular benefits of a lower waking and rest and heart rate. But we should always aim to have it just 55 or below. That's always kind of the standard that I will have. If not, then that might give us an indication that something else is going on. So when we look at what's the reasons for that, so obviously this is a bit more nerdier now. So the adrenal glands, which obviously sit above the kidneys, release things such as cortisol and epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline and noradrenaline. So these have a massive influence on heart rate. You give someone a shot of adrenaline, what's going to happen to the heart? It's like that movie Crank with Jason Statham.
Yeah.
Keeps going, So if I'm awake first thing in the morning and my heart rate is up 10 beats, okay, I haven't really done anything that stressful yet. I might have just woke up, might have went to, the toilet, but I haven't really done anything that's going to put my body in a massive fight or flight state. So if my heart rate's super elevated, then that might be an indication of poor recovery. So then we might go, okay, just be aware of it. Again, it's trends we're looking for. If it's continually going down that rate, then we're going, okay, now it's time to pull it back a little bit. And that's when we might do a deload phase or something like that.
Yeah, cool. And final one then, buddy, would be blood glucose. So why would we track blood glucose? Why is it important, and how does that interact with everything else that we're sort of looking into?
So fasting blood glucose levels is something I don't normally do a lot of with people. It's invasive, so you have to stab yourself in the finger and basically get your blood onto a stick to then read it. So it does have a lot of a buy-in. So I rarely get clients to do this. One, because it's expensive to have the strips, and also you have to do it pretty much in the mornings, obviously when you are hydrated, and that's another big thing. You've got to have a decent amount of fluid in your system, because otherwise, if you've went say 8 hours without any water, you're going to have a slight dehydrating effect, which will impair the fasting blood glucose level. So we'll see that it's a lot higher. So normally the range that we want is around 4.2 to 5.5 millimoles per liter. So that's just kind of the range when you look at that. And what this does is, if you think glucose is the immediate energy in the body, okay? So it's the one that you use most of the time when we're resistance training, and not a lot at rest. When we're looking like kind of percentage of output, anything below kind of that 50% of max effort work, you're going to be oxidizing more free fatty acids and triglycerides or fat. So if I'm awake first thing in the morning, I've had my water, and my fasting blood glucose level is something like 6 or 7, then that might be an indication, okay, I'm not metabolizing glucose effectively. I'm not getting glucose to go into muscle cells appropriately, and that might be an issue in that situation. The same situation can also occur if it's too low. So that's obviously hypoglycemia, which is an issue where, you might get a little bit headed, lethargic, stuff like that, because we don't have enough of that in. So maybe then having some glucose around training or in the morning will kind of bring that up a little bit, as long as it's not like a reactive hypoglycemia,
Yep. So in terms of everything that we track, that would be one of the last things you would...
That is literally the, if someone wants to do it, great. Like obviously I work with diabetics, so we have to track that.
Yeah.
But if it was like someone for a bodybuilding show or something like that, I wouldn't really use it as much, because for me personally, it's way too much of a buy-in. If I'm getting them to do all the other kind of tracking before, I can pretty much extrapolate that data and go, I think you've got good glucose management. If you don't, they'll start to tell you, I'm feeling soft and fluidy. I'm not really getting any good pumps when I'm training, I just feel legitimately like shit. And then we might go, okay, this might be an indication. Let's get your heart rate. What's your working heart rate? Oh, it's 80. Okay, well, that's not good. We want to bring that down. Let's pull your training down a little bit. Let's improve your cardiovascular fitness. Let's get you doing some yoga sessions. Let's get you getting a massage, just chilling out. Let's find a hobby for you to do, something like that. And then we're going to see that heart rate will start dropping down, and it might get back to kind of like the 54 beats per minute that we want. Okay, how do you look now? Yeah, I look like a Greek god. Okay, cool. Well, we could probably say you're managing glucose more effectively now. Let's get back to training as it was before, but just be wary of these numbers now.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that's a good little sum up as well, mate, because it shows that it does have its place, but maybe not for everyone. Like a lot of this stuff, mate, like I said, I don't actually track with clients. It's mainly steps, digestion, sleep, and then occasionally blood pressure, as long as don't see it as too much of a hassle to either buy something or go to the pharmacy, right? But all these extra things that we've thrown in terms of HRV, blood glucose, rest and heart rate, that's all stuff that will be added in for clients in terms of if they want to do it and have it there. So let's finish off, mate, with, is there anything else that you would track, and why would you do so?
That would probably be kind of like the biggest things that I would track with clients in terms of functional biometrics. I wouldn't go anything too kind of excessive from that. I feel that covers the wide spectrum of health, and also allows me to go, okay, is the training program that I'm creating and the nutrition program I've created going to get me the results I'm after? I don't want to hassle too many people with the data, because then we get an issue of like paralysis by analysis, and they start getting anxiety around that. So it's kind of what I normally say to a lot of people is minimums I kind of want steps. So exactly same as you, steps, digestion, sleep, and waking heart rate. If they can get the blood pressure and heart rate variability, awesome. If they can't, I'm not going to be too kind of considered by that. I can get a lot of data from those, and it will show basically how to progress. And if I need to change anything or make any kind of considerations from that. Yeah,
for me, and it's always good, because like I see you as like one of the kings around here in terms of going the extra mile with this. Like, so to see that we're on the same wavelength is a good sign. So yeah, I like this. It's reinforced that what I'm doing is right. And also we've got loads of nuggets in here in terms of that's, I think 6 different categories we covered on what people can do to get the extra 1%, or what they need to be doing daily in terms of the big 3 or 4 that they really should be doing every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that as well. I really appreciate those kind of words. That's yeah.
Yeah, man, 100%. Just keep doing what you're doing, because your reputation around Perth is pretty stellar, and it's grown and grown. And I know there's big things in the future for you as well, buddy. So yeah, can't wait to see them, and keep pumping on.
No, thanks, bro. I appreciate it.
It's been really good, guys. So if you don't already follow Dan, you will find him in my followers list. Just type to people who I follow and type Dan in, and you'll find him. If not Dan, what is it? Dan _ TeamEcto, or is it all one?
It's Dan _ TeamEcto. So that's my Instagram, and that's probably these days the best way to get in contact with me, unless we're Facebook friends, but that's a very hard hit sometimes.
yeah, fair enough. And guys, if you did enjoy this, just take a screenshot, tag Dan, tag me, so that we know this type of stuff goes down well. I do encourage that on every podcast, because one, it gets a message out there. Maybe one of your friends needs this sort of information and you've provided them with the vehicle to learn this through posting it. But also it just shows us that you like the content, you've enjoyed this, and you want similar stuff like this along the way. And like I said, Dan, maybe we'll do a deeper one on some of these. Did we say it was going to be sleep? Yeah, night shifts.
Night shifts. So night shift and sleeps. Yeah, that'll be really, really good one to go down. Yeah,
we'll maybe give the audience a month or so break, and then we'll come back on with a big in-depth one on, because that's one thing that clients always ask me about, or if they say on their forms, like, oh, I've worked night shifts, I'm like, right, go look at somebody like Dr. Dean or somebody who actually works a night shift to understand it. But if we can put it out on a podcast, it's just easy, and then I can refer to people, like, I'll go and listen to this, and vice versa for you. Rather than you have to repeat yourself, you can go, oh, listen to this interview I did with O on his podcast, right?
Yeah, that's it, for sure. It's just rather than me doing a 20-minute video on it now, I can just go, here's the podcast. Yeah. Please listen, please watch, and then it will give you a lot more information on that, for sure.
Yeah, maybe we'll hook that up and we'll get that booked in then for mid-September to record that one, buddy.
Yeah, awesome, bro.
That'll be killer, mate. Thanks for coming on. Guys, if you enjoyed this, like I said, please tag us, and I will see you on the next episode. Take care.
Thanks for listening to The O Show with your host, Oren McCory. If you liked this episode, then please subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening and share this on your social media. We'll see you on the next episode for more no-nonsense advice to help you supercharge your efforts in the gym, in the kitchen, and most importantly, in your head. See you then.